Ross, put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball. Now, later in this show, we will give you a template of everything that's going on for this incredible weekend in college basketball as we continue to dissect, digest, and offer some perspective on the greatest game that we have on our earth. Meanwhile, I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also, want you to hit the subscribe and like button on YouTube, and let's set a goal for ourselves right now. Let's get 100 likes on this episode and keep building and building and building until we have an empire. Because I want to remind you to make sure that you are aware of our programming schedule. During the 25-26 college basketball season, we will be coming to you every Monday and Thursday live at 1 o'clock Eastern. So you want to plan your schedule. You want to make sure your calendar is built around that. Every Monday and Thursday live at 1 o'clock Eastern for a full show on the soup to nuts of the greatest sport we have on this planet. And beyond that, we are going to be catching up also during the week with the biggest and best names that exist in college basketball. It's been a fun week of college hoops. We saw a lot of action Tuesday night. Louisville had a big win over Kentucky. Obviously, a big win for Illinois over Texas Tech. And also a really fun scene on CBS Sports Network as Duke beat Army in a night that obviously was set out to honor Coach K. And Coach K was a guest on the Inside College Basketball Now podcast. I want to continue to encourage you to check that out in the archives page. And again, you have to subscribe on Apple and Spotify. And that was some great stuff to get going early in the week. But with that said, we are all about looking forward in life. And that is why we start, as always, with three big things. And the first big thing we want to get to is tonight's heavyweight matchup in Tuscaloosa between Purdue and Alabama, two teams that played in the 2024 Final Four when UConn beat the Boilers in the national championship game. And there is no way around this. The matchup tonight in Tuscaloosa between Purdue and Alabama is a Final Four caliber game. Now, each and every day, and if you follow me on this show or if you follow me on other platforms, it is well documented that I rank 45 teams every single day. And right now in the Rothstein 45, which is posted between 9 and 10 a.m. Eastern every single day, the number one ranked team is Purdue. And the number 3 ranked team is Alabama. And if the Crimson Tide are to win tonight against the Boilers, Alabama will be the number 1 team in the Rothstein 45 coming up on Friday. But it's more than that if you're Nate Oates in Alabama. Part of the reason why this program has been so successful over the last half decade, and in that last half decade, Nate Oates and Alabama have went to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament 4 times in 5 years, which was obviously capped off by a trip to the Final Four in 2024, went to the Elite Eight last season and lost to Cooper, Flagg, and Duke. But with that said, if Alabama beats Purdue tonight, you are talking about a team in Alabama that will, on November the 13th, have on its resume a road win at St. John's and also a home win over Purdue, a team in Purdue that, again, returns 86% of its scoring from last season's team that went to the Sweet 16, and a team that is thought by many to be a team that is more than capable of not just going to the Final Four and winning a national championship, but doing it at a high level in terms of winning 30-plus games prior to the NCAA tournament. That's all on the table. So Alabama, even though it's November, can be in a situation where it starts building the equity towards a resume on Selection Sunday that could warrant a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, somebody could say, well, how can you say that on November 13th? Look at what is in front of the Crimson Tide from a scheduling perspective. After Purdue tonight, Alabama is going to go to Chicago and take on an Illinois team that beat Texas Tech and was playing without Tomislav Ivicic. And beyond that, Alabama's going to go to Las Vegas to play 3 big games in the Players Era Festival. And Alabama will also, in Birmingham, play Arizona in December. This is all before the Crimson Tide play in the SEC, a conference that got 14 teams into the NCAA tournament last year. But Alabama, if it wins tonight, will not just be the number one team according to my rankings, but will be a team that will be, in my position, building a foundation to be a number one seed in the 2026 NCAA tournament. But this is only November, and we haven't even seen Purdue yet in a regular season game with a full deck. That should change tonight. According to a school spokesman, All-American big man Trey Kaufman-Renn, who missed Purdue's first two games with a hip injury, will indeed make his season debut tonight in Tuscaloosa. Now, this game was a heavyweight matchup to begin with. This game, make no mistake about it, was a heavyweight matchup from the start. But with that said, the dynamics changed a little bit now for me with Trey Kaufman-Renn available. Why is that? When Purdue went to Kentucky to play an exhibition game, even though Trey Kaufman-Renn got his numbers, I believe it was magnified that there was a position switch for this young man from last season to this season. Last season, he was a five-man. Purdue operated with more space offensively. This year, he went back to the four, and there was a lot, in my opinion, of clutter for Purdue with Kaufman-Renn playing alongside another big man, whether it was Oscar Clough or Daniel Jacobson. Now, I am not saying that Purdue won't be successful going back to playing two bigs. That's what we saw in 2024 when Kaufman-Renn started alongside Zach Edey. But this game in particular might be extra difficult for Purdue to play two big men at the same time. Now, why do I say that? I was courtside last Saturday at Madison Square Garden, where Alabama put up 103 points on St. John's. It was the first time that the Red Storm have allowed 100 or more points under Rick Pitino, and it was the first time since 1965 that St. John's scored 96 points or more in a game and didn't win. What happened in 1965? It was Lou Carnesecca's first season as St. John's head coach. And obviously the backbone of that run for Alabama on Saturday against St. John's was the terrific troika of guards that produced at a high level. LeBaron Philon, who's playing like an All-American, Aiden Holloway, and Latrell Wrightsell. Those three players combined for 63 of the Crimson Tide's 103 points. And Nate Oates, who has always been as innovative an offensive coach as there's been in the sport, for long stretches in this game, had no hesitations to play four guards at the same time, whether it be Houston Millett, whether it be obviously playing more of a forward with some skill like Amari Allen, who has been very good for the Crimson Tide out of the gate. It's been real simple for Nate Oates. Let's put guys on the floor that can pass, dribble, and shoot, and let's downshift and make people guard us. And another guy who I want to highlight, who could be a very big key in tonight's game, is Taylor Bol-Bowen, the transfer from Florida State, who finished the game against St. John's on Saturday as a small ball five. He finished with 17 points and 9 rebounds, made a huge three late in the game. But if Alabama is consistently putting 4 perimeter players on the floor, and if Purdue is committed to playing Trey Kaufman-Renn and another big man, that means that while Purdue might have an advantage on the other side of the floor on offense, Trey Kaufman-Renn, if he's at the 4, is going to have to go on the perimeter and chase around another perimeter player. And that's something I'm looking closely at. Because Alabama, again, as expected under Nate Oates, looks like the most entertaining team in college basketball. And Alabama did things on Saturday against St. John's that nobody has done to the Red Storm since Rick Pitino was the coach. And again, I saw with my own 2 eyes what it looked like when Bryce Hopkins, who was the 4-man for St. John's, had to guard a perimeter player. It distorts everything you want to do from a defensive perspective. And the dynamic surrounding Purdue is really fascinating to me. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. When you bring back a team that has seen everything in college basketball the year prior, and in this case, the last 3 years prior. It's a dynamic to manage the fact that team knows that its ultimate destiny and ultimate legacy will be defined by what it does in the NCAA tournament in 2026. And make no mistake about it, if Purdue does not advance to the Final Four at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, the season will be viewed as a disappointment, considering what Purdue brings back, considering the fact that it brings back 2 All-Americans in Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn, considering the fact that Fletcher Lawyer right now looks like the best shooter in the sport. He's 10 of 17 from 3 going into tonight's game against Alabama. Those are the expectations on Purdue. Now, with that said, this team and this core of players, Smith, Lawyer, and Kaufman-Renn, have seen everything in college basketball. A couple of years ago, 2023, you win the Big Ten regular season title, you win the Big Ten tournament title, but you lose to Fairleigh Dickinson in the biggest upset in the history of the NCAA tournament. 1 year later, tremendous bounce back story. Purdue goes to the Final Four for the first time since 1980, loses to an all-time great UConn team. Last year, do as well as you can, given the fact that Purdue was probably a little bit small on the boards, hence why they went out and got Oscar Clough out of the transfer portal, lose a heartbreaker to Houston in the Sweet 16. But now, it's Final Four or bust, but you do not start the season on Selection Sunday. And I'm going to give you 2 teams that had to deal with that in the last 5 years. 2021, Mick Cronin takes UCLA to the Final Four. Johnny Juzang goes off in the 2021 NCAA tournament. That whole team comes back. UCLA signs Miles Johnson as a grad transfer from Rutgers. UCLA knows that ultimately, with this nucleus of players, it has a team in place to go back to the Final Four and try and win a national championship. Jaime Jaquez in the NCAA tournament blows out his ankle against St. Mary's, plays against North Carolina the next week in the Sweet 16, but doesn't shoot the ball well. 5 of 18, clearly hobbled. North Carolina gets a big offensive rebound late in the game. Armando Bacot kicks it out to Caleb Love. Carolina wins. Who does Carolina play in the Elite Eight? St. Peter's, who was on a magical run, but it plays St. Peter's to go to the Elite Eight. So that UCLA team, and again, the health of Jaquez had a big hand in really distorting their path, misses the chance to go to back-to-back Final Fours, and was inconsistent that year throughout in 21-22, only entered the NCAA tournament as a 4 seed. That's a lot to manage as a head coach in the locker room or a coaching staff in the locker room. What about the next year? North Carolina, the team that beat that UCLA team, goes to the national championship game where it had a lead on Kansas. Kansas came back, played a great second half. Remy Martin was huge down the stretch, wins the national title in 2022, Bill Self second. But North Carolina brought back in 22-23 4 starters: R.J. Davis, Caleb Love, Leaky Black, and Armando Bacot. Preseason number 1. Carolina doesn't make the tournament. I'm not saying those things are going to happen for Purdue, but what I'm saying is Matt Painter has a nucleus in place that has been 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament. Matt Painter has a nucleus in place that went through the Fairleigh Dickinson embarrassment and bounced back to go to the Final Four for the first time since 1980. But really, let's be honest right now. We're seeing it all across the country. The curtain does not come up for the best teams in college basketball until you go play somebody who you know that can beat you. And this is why I am so invigorated by what's going on in college basketball in November and December. We got great games on top of great games. It's going to be an awesome, awesome weekend in the sport. But now, even though I loved and still do love to an extent these early season tournaments, fewer early season tournaments open the door for more marquee matchups. And we have a marquee matchup of epic proportions tonight in Tuscaloosa. Purdue and Alabama. Boilers number 1 in my rankings. Alabama number 3, even if these rankings differ according to the AP poll, which I vote for every week. I go by my rankings. And I know that if Alabama wins the game tonight, Alabama will be number 1. And I also know this. Trey Kaufman-Wren tonight is probably going to have to go out a perimeter player. And I hit the Instacart already. I've got bags of Skinny Pop, and I can't wait because there are certain safe snacks that you learn to beat the system with when you get 40 plus. I eat more berries than anybody in America, and I eat more Skinny Pop than anybody in America. I haven't had a Peroni since September 13th because some people give it up for Lent, but I'm Jewish, so I gave it up for non-conference play. These are the sacrifices you have to make when you want to try to stay somewhat thin. But make no mistake about it. When we get through non-conference play, and that happens, a couple days before Christmas, you better believe I'm going to be having Peroni and Tarales with Die Hard in the background, thinking about what happened during the first 2 months of the college basketball season. And the first 2 months of the college basketball season are better now because we have games like we have tonight with Purdue and Alabama. But there are more great games this weekend. What games are we highlighting? Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball. I'm going to get you to those games and all the other topics we want to cover today in college basketball. But again, want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want you to like and subscribe on YouTube. We want to get to 100 likes on this show, and I want you to be with us on this show and every show. Again, we are live Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern, and we will also bring you interviews throughout the week with the biggest and best names in the sport. I need an army with me every single Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern. Be all you can be, and stick around for the rest of what's on tap for this weekend in college basketball. Jon Rothstein on Inside College Basketball now.
They want to take this place from us.
My family is in danger. My wife is lost to me, and I don't have time.
1923, new season now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball now. Our second big thing focuses on a heavyweight showdown on Saturday night in Boston between BYU and UConn. It is a homecoming game for A.J. Dybantsa, the New England native, coming back to play one of the best brands in college basketball, a program that has won 2 of the last 3 national championships. It is a game that I have looked forward to since I found out that it was going to happen during the offseason. And I firmly believe this. UConn has obviously put a major imprint from Jim Calhoun to Dan Hurley at Madison Square Garden. UConn has always been great at MSG. But make no mistake about it, there is an opportunity for UConn to play an annual game in Boston. And I remember what it sounded like when UConn played in the East Regionals in 24 at TD Garden in Boston. San Diego State was eviscerated. Illinois was eviscerated. 30-0 run in the Elite Eight. There is no reason why UConn would not play a game in Boston every single year. You got the North End. You got the Seaport District. There's enough there for the UConn fan base, which is now, again, 90 minutes away from stores, to play an annual game in Boston. But let's get to the BYU game itself. BYU is a program that is now a couple of weeks in to the most anticipated season in program history because of the addition of A.J. Dybantsa. And you don't put a lot of stock into what happens in the guarantee games, but BYU did play an improved Villanova team in Vegas on opening night and got the win. And BYU, clearly so far this season, has 3 very talented offensive players. Richie Saunders, who averaged 22 points per game last year in the NCAA tournament when BYU advanced to the Sweet 16 and lost to Alabama. A.J. Dybantsa and Rob Wright. That is your main troika for the Cougars, along with Keba Keita, who anchors the post spot. And this is going to be a major stage for those players. Dybantsa has gotten so much attention, and for good reason. We know he's in the mix to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 NBA draft. But Saunders has been sensational this year, averaging over 20 points a game. And again, proving, and I saw this at a BYU practice, that he is not just a complimentary piece, but he's also an all Big 12 player. But this is the first installment of what I believe is the best non-conference schedule in the history of UConn basketball. UConn's game against BYU, to me, is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity for college basketball to get a look at a player that I don't think anybody is talking about, but I think a player who has a chance to be an all Big East first team caliber player this year, and maybe better if the Huskies have the type of season that we anticipate they're having. And that's Tarris Reed. Tarris Reed is a player that had significant issues last season in his first year for UConn, staying on the floor due to foul trouble. He only played 37 minutes in the NCAA tournament last year, and he committed 8 fouls in the Huskies' 2 games. But when he stays on the floor and when his usage is at a certain level, he's one of the best big men in college basketball. Now, he's averaging close to 20 and 10 right now against 2 mid-major opponents, but I'm not interested to see what Tarris Reed did against UMass Lowell and Columbia. I'm interested what he does against BYU on Saturday night at TD Garden. But I think this is somebody, again, that could change things for the Huskies because of the space he creates and because of the shots he creates for others. And I think if you're looking, in addition to Tarris Reed, at other variables to keep an eye on for UConn, you have to look at the point guard spot. And the best teams that Dan Hurley has had as a college head coach have had great size and efficiency at point guard. Jeff Doughton at Rhode Island and Tristan Newton at UConn. Silas Demery Jr., a transfer from Georgia, is going to step up a weight class on Saturday night against Rob Wright. There are 2 point guards in UConn's rotation. One is Demery. The other is Malachi Smith, the transfer from Dayton. And these players are going to dictate a lot of what BYU is or isn't able to do from the point guard spot. And they're also going to dictate a lot of the long-term ceiling for UConn in 25-26. But Saturday night in Boston should be an absolute event between UConn and BYU. It feels like a Sweet 16 caliber game. And it's also going to tell us a lot about BYU. BYU a year ago came across the country, played Providence at Amica Mutual Pavilion, and was dominated by the Friars. BYU is now coming east again in an incredibly hostile environment to take on one of the top brands in the sport in its backyard. Now, keep this in mind as well when you watch UConn on Saturday night. The UConn that we see in November, the UConn that we see play BYU, the UConn that we see play Arizona coming up next week in stores, and the UConn that we see play Illinois on Black Friday at Madison Square Garden, and potentially the UConn that we see play at Kansas on December 2nd, is not going to be the UConn that we're going to see late in the season. Now, why is that? Braylon Mullins, a 5-star freshman and a cemented starter at UConn, is still out of the lineup due to an injury. So UConn is still not nearly what they're going to be as a product in terms of a finished product. But I'll say this. I've seen 30 teams so far this season. Actually, I've seen more because I saw 30 prior to the start of the year. So I've seen probably 35 teams roughly in person, maybe 34. No team was as connected as UConn when I saw the Huskies practice. None. UConn season to me feels like Rocky III. They were the champs. They won 2 in a row. They got punched in the mouth last year. But now it's all about getting back to the beginning. And that quest for UConn begins Saturday night, 90 minutes from campus at TD Garden. If BYU is going to be taken seriously as a team that can get to a Final Four and compete for that, BYU has to go to Boston, in my opinion, and play well and be competitive in this hostile environment. I'm not so concerned about the wins and the losses at this juncture for BYU because that's going to be a hornet's nest at TD Garden. I want to see if BYU, with Wright, with DeBansa, with Saunders, are going to be good enough and composed enough to handle the hostile environment. And I was at a BYU practice in Provo in the preseason, and I was taking inventory of the Cougars roster. And I will say this, the biggest questions that I have for BYU this year, what does the depth look like after the top 5 players or so? And what will the interior defense look like? Keba Keita was huge for BYU on opening night down the stretch, carving out space against Villanova. If Tarris Reed is on the floor, the weight class goes up in the pivot. And I think Tarris Reed, along with the point guard play with Silas Demery Jr., those two pieces will be critical to whether or not UConn can get back to a Final Four for the third time in 4 years. But you know as well as I do, this is only November. The third big thing I want to look at, UCLA's front court is going to be severely tested on Friday night at Intuit Dome against Arizona. I was at an Arizona practice in the preseason, and I couldn't believe the sheer size that Arizona had up front with Mo Krivish, who's back healthy, with Toby Awaka, with Koa Pete. There is size on top of size up front for the Wildcats, a front line that out-rebounded Florida with Tommy Houck, Alex Condon, Micah Handlogden, and Ruben Chinyelu on opening night. And now Arizona goes to LA to take on its former rival from the Pac-12, UCLA. And I've watched UCLA's 3 games. And UCLA has not been at full strength. Donovan Dent didn't play in the last game against West Georgia. The Bruins are 3-0, but there are major, major questions defensively for UCLA, and there are major, major questions on the glass for UCLA. UCLA was a very poor rebounding team last year. But UCLA, and any team that has ever played under Mick Cronin, has never been associated with poor defense. I have not seen in UCLA's first 3 games, 3 bye games, the Bruins make anybody uncomfortable. Anybody. That has to change if UCLA is going to have a chance to win this game. Now, I spent time on a show over the summer talking about how one player could change the ceiling for UCLA, and that is Michigan State transfer Xavier Booker. UCLA went out and got its high-profile, upgraded point guard in New Mexico transfer Donovan Dent. UCLA brought back Sky Clark, Eric Daly, and Tyler Bilodeau from a team that won 23 games and a game in the NCAA tournament. He added an All-American at point guard. But we're going to find out whether or not Xavier Booker is capable of being assertive enough on the backboard and at the front of the rim defensively to give UCLA a chance to be one of the best teams in the country. Because the sample size was small and it was against non-power conference teams. But Xavier Booker, as of now, is giving UCLA offense. He's averaging about 11 points a game. He's rebounding the ball well for him, about 6 a game. And he's blocking on average about 3 shots. But this is against non-power conference teams, not against Toby Awaka, Mo Krivish, or Koa Pete. The weight class will also step up for Xavier Booker. And for UCLA, again, a team that has not played as well in its 3 regular season games as it's played in its exhibition games. UCLA was much better against San Diego State and UC Irvine than it was in the 3 games it's played so far. The rebounding, the defense, it's all a major, major question going into Friday night's game against Arizona. A matchup of point guards with Dent and Bradley, a matchup of coaches in Cronin and Tommy Lloyd, and a really, really fun venue, which we saw last year when UCLA played Gonzaga. But now we're going to get answers, and this is what I love about this time of year. UCLA obviously had a gaping hole in the middle when Adai Mara, who transferred to Michigan, looks like he's going to have a great year if the early indications are anything. But UCLA went and got Xavier Booker, a former McDonald's All-American. If Xavier Booker can give the same production he's given in the first 3 games, UCLA is going to be really, really good. But we know that things are going to be different come Friday night against Arizona. Big games on top of big games. Purdue, Alabama tonight. UCLA, Arizona on Friday. BYU, UConn on Saturday. What are you most excited for this weekend? And also, what are your biggest takeaways from the week? The chat is bleeding right now. I'm going to get to it. I want you to also encourage you to give us 100 likes today on YouTube, and also subscribe to us on Apple and Spotify. We're coming to you every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern live, and we'll also bring you other episodes with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. I need an army with me on Inside College Basketball Now. Are you ready to be all you can be? Your comments when we return. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. Let's get into the live chat. Lots of questions. Ahmed wants to know, John, tell us why Arizona will get past the Elite Eight this year. Well, Tommy Lloyd has led Arizona to 3 Sweet 16 appearances in his tenure as Arizona's head coach. You know, sometimes in college basketball, when you least expect to break through, you break through. And I was talking about Alabama earlier in the season, earlier in the show. That's a perfect example. Alabama's 2021 team with Herb Jones was probably more talented than the 2024 team that went to the Final Four. And last year's team was probably more talented than the 2024 team. And a team with Brandon Miller in 2023 that was the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament was more talented. But sometimes injuries, matchups, things align, and it changes. Let's go now to Josh Ward, 1713. John, why should I believe my Gonzaga Bulldogs can make a Final Four run with this team? Well, I'll tell you. Gonzaga has been as impressive, and I'm going to get to more of this later in the show, but Gonzaga has been as impressive as any team I have seen so far. And the thing you have to like about the Bulldogs is Gonzaga has played quality competition, a dominant win against Oklahoma at Spokane Arena last Saturday, and a blowout win over Creighton earlier in the week in Spokane. Gonzaga is going to also play in the Players Era Festival coming up Thanksgiving week, so there'll be more big games there. Plus, obviously, matchups with UCLA and Kentucky loom. So Gonzaga, much like Alabama, building a resume. More questions right now in the chat. Michael Kie says, John, Georgetown versus Clemson prediction. That's Saturday in Washington, D.C. That's a really, really big game for Ed Cooley in Georgetown. I talked about this earlier in the week on Monday's show. Georgetown has a few big non-conference games remaining. Clemson, 2 games in Florida during Thanksgiving week, Dayton, and then either Miami or BYU, and then a road trip to North Carolina. Georgetown has to get 2 of those games to make the NCAA tournament. Clemson, you're playing at home. You hope that Georgetown gets a good crowd, but you just never know. Justin QP3NZ says, John, NC State looks like a top 15 team, scoring 110. Talking about last night against UNC Greensboro without Trey Holloman or Terrence Arsenault. I think they can win the ACC. Can NC State win the ACC? It is really tough to make that kind of a statement after you watch NC State play guarantee games. With all due respect, NC State is doing what it should do, beating the teams that it should beat at home. But you look at the ACC right now, you can't say that Duke or Louisville are not the 2 best teams. And even with that said, North Carolina has a win on its resume at home without Kansas. Virginia Tech with Neoclis Abdalas is appointment television. Syracuse looks better. Virginia looks better. And I'm going to stick to what I said early in the season. The ACC, in order to really feel like it's turning a corner as a conference, has to get at least 6 teams in the NCAA tournament. My early impressions, the ACC could get more than that. Keep an eye on Miami as well. Let's see. More questions here. More questions. Everybody wants to talk. We got St. John's fans. We got other people. FSU for life wants to know, John, can UCLA win their conference? Now, look, I will say this. Given the travel that exists in the Big Ten for the 4 Pacific time zone schools, UCLA, USC, and also Washington, Oregon, and given what the totality of that experience is like, I don't think people understand what that does to people, mentally and physically during the season. I don't think a team from the Pacific time zone will ever win a Big Ten regular season title, and I'm going to tell you why. It's not just the trip. It's the fact that with the schedules as they're set up, you don't always have an advantage when you're playing a home game. I'll give you a perfect example. UCLA, I believe it's January 17th, plays a game at Ohio State. 2 great brands, should be a great game. That's Saturday. That game's going to be in Columbus. UCLA then has to travel back from Columbus to Los Angeles after the game, which you're going to be exhausted. It's a 3-quarter cross-country trip, plus obviously the time change, you're going to be exhausted. So then that is a Saturday. On Tuesday at Pauley Pavilion, UCLA has to play Purdue. But the difference is UCLA is going to be shot from that trip from Columbus to Los Angeles and probably won't practice on Sunday because it's been on the road for a week. And then it's going to have 1 day of prep to play a team in Purdue that was picked to obviously be the number 1 team in college basketball. And Purdue's been in Los Angeles for a week waiting for UCLA because it was playing USC. And the same thing is true for Oregon watching USC. I don't think a team from the Pacific time zone is going to ever win a Big Ten regular season title. Patrick Bennett says, can you talk about what you saw in Gonzaga Creighton? I see great balance with Gonzaga. I don't see necessarily the star power I saw with Adam Morrison or Rui Hachimura or players like that, but I see incredible balance. I see what I thought I saw up front, or I thought I forecasted up front with Huff and Ike, one of the best 4-5s in the country. There's good positional size on the wings with Jalen Worley and Tyon Grant Foster. There's capable point guard play with Braden Smith and Mario St. Superi. I mean, I think there's a real chance, or Superi, we'll get to it eventually. I think there's a real chance again for Gonzaga to continue to build a strong resume. Want to get now to 3 good nuggets as we continue to march on here on Inside College Basketball Now. Nugget number 1, sharing is caring. Indiana has 73 assists on 103 made field goals this season. That is an incredible stat. The Hoosiers had 27 assists on 33 made field goals in Sunday's blowout win over Marquette. Another note on Indiana. The Hoosiers will not play another road game until December 3rd in the Big Ten opener at Minnesota. Indiana has its next 4 games at home. The wild card is a game on November 25th against Kansas State. But there's a real chance that the Hoosiers, if they hold serve at home, could be 7-0 entering the month of December. Nugget number 2, balance in the Great Northwest. This is what I was just referencing with Gonzaga. Gonzaga right now has 6 players: Graham Ike, Braden Huff, Tyon Grant Foster, Adam Miller, Jalen Worley, and Mario St. Superi, averaging between 9.7 and 17.3 points per game. That is the type of balance right now that has Gonzaga turning everybody's head. Bulldogs back in action Friday night at Arizona State. Nugget number 3, magic from McNeil. I'm talking about NC State's Paul McNeil, somebody who was recruited by Kevin Keatts. I went and saw him last year in a preseason practice and loved his potential. Paul McNeil is giving NC State a bona fide 1-2 punch with he and with Darian Williams, who is playing and showing people why he was the ACC preseason player of the year. I thought McNeil had a chance to be a double-figure scorer this year. He is usurping those expectations in November. Had a big-time game against UNC Greensboro on Wednesday night, averaging right now 20.3 points per game, and he's a whopping 13 of 28 from 3. Paul McNeil is a name to monitor in the ACC. Now, NC State has held serve so far this season, but the next 5 games will tell us a lot about the Wolfpack. NC State will host VCU next week. It then goes to play 3 games at the Maui Invitational. And then NC State will go on the road as part of the ACC SEC Challenge to take on Auburn. But make no mistake about it, Paul McNeil looking like a quality secondary option and potential all-ACC player alongside the utility piece that is Darian Williams. Darian Williams was awesome against UNC Greensboro, and he's showing why he has the ability to touch so many different areas of the box score. Williams can score, he can rebound, he can set the table. And with Darian Williams and Paul McNeil, Will Wade may very well have 2 all-ACC players. Now, as everybody knows who follows me, I have a policy. If a team loses a bye game, if a team hands a team a check for $80, $90, $100, $110,000 and loses the game, it's the epitome of brutality. And unfortunately for our friends at DePaul the other night, DePaul lost the bye game to Buffalo. But kudos to our great production staff. This was dug up because 6 years ago, DePaul also lost a game to Buffalo that was a bye game. So it's the epitome of brutality, the sequel. Better days are ahead for DePaul. All right, 3 games to watch, 3 we've been talking about. Now, when I do games to watch on the show on Mondays and Thursdays, I'm going to give you 3 big games to watch between that day's show and our next show, and also 3 under-the-radar games. Purdue, Bama, obviously tonight, Final Four game. Friday, we got Arizona, UCLA at the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles. Saturday is BYU, UConn. 3 under-the-radar games, all on Sunday. Notre Dame, Ohio State. This is the first power conference game for both programs. Auburn against Houston on Sunday in Birmingham. This will be the first big-time game for Stephen Pearl as head coach. And then Sunday night, Florida, who obviously has, I think, looked a little bit shaky here out of the gate, is going to take on a Miami team coached by Jay Lucas in his first year that I think sneaky good. I think Miami looks like it could be part of that group of ACC teams that could be vastly improved this year in what should be a real nice bounce-back year for the conference. Want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball now on both Apple and Spotify. Again, we want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Hit the like button, get us to 100 for the show, and subscribe on YouTube. And also, be part of this army, because we need an army with us every single Monday and Thursday when we're live at 1 o'clock Eastern. This is only November, but I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.